This is Lantern's Light, written by James Wallow. Unofficial audio narration by Joe Silva. The message had been phrased to make it sound like a request, but in truth, it was a summons. It was a father's demand to his son, the orders of a general to his soldier. "Make haste to my side," it said, "so we may speak." It pretended to be spoken among equals, but Mortarion knew that it was anything but. The Emperor of Mankind could not utter a single word without it becoming an inviolate command.
"And who are you to defy your Gene Father?"
The question echoed in the depths of the warrior's clouded thoughts. It came to Mortarion in a ghostly voice he almost recognized. His eyes rose, looking up from the depths of the hooded robe that formed a shroud about his sallow face. The great mantle was draped over a suit of artificer-wrought power armor, which in recent months Mortarion had learned to wear like a second skin, and it pooled on the deck of the shuttlecraft where he sat on a low iron bench. The armor had been modified extensively after it was presented to him. The body sleeve, battle plate, and synthetic musculature fitted the Primarch as if he had been born to it, but Mortarion had not cared for the ornate beautifications and martial decor built into the gauntlets, greaves, and cuirass. To the dismay of the armorial artisans in service to the Emperor, Mortarion stripped the superfluous detailing and discarded it, leaving only the heraldry that was necessary for battlefield operations. Instead, he made them cast an icon of the Death Guard's sigil and placed that upon the plate. The skull and sun was too potent a symbol, too close to his heart to be left behind along with the rest of his old life. The skull meant death, as it both threatened Mortarion's life and stood as his ally, while the six-pointed sun represented the illumination of freedom he had brought to his world.
"But is our world free?"
The voice whispered the question as the small starcraft passed beyond the pull of planetary gravity, and Mortarion allowed his attention to drift to a glassy portal in the shuttle's hull. Out there, framed against an endless veil of dark nebulae, he saw the arc of Barbarus' surface. From this vantage, his homeworld was a churning sphere of orange-amber toxin clouds agitated by the radiation of a weak yellow sun. Only the vaguest shape of land masses beneath the cloud banks could be determined. The planet had a baleful, menacing aspect, but still it stirred a strange kind of melancholy in Mortarion's heart. Even as the revelations of his true roots continued to unfold, Barbarus would forever remain the place where Mortarion had been born, and it mattered little to him if he had not actually originated there. Barbarus had forged Mortarion into what he was now, and he would never forget that. And yet, Mortarion's gaze moved to the stormy nebula shroud, billions of spans beyond the furthest orbit of this solar system. He had long known of sister worlds to Barbarus orbiting their sun, having snatched the knowledge of such forbidden lore from the books of his adoptive father, the brutal overlord Nakare. But to know, as he did now, that there were trillions more stars and worlds out past that Stygian veil, the thought of it was dazzling. A part of him wanted to see those worlds, to sink his mailed gloves in their sands and waters, to stride across new lands and alien vistas, to fight in new battles. Not since he had been a youth had Mortarion been so thirsty for knowledge. Then, the skeletal and cruel Nakare had beaten him and denied any education that was not of the overlord's desiring, forcing Mortarion to learn through guile and subterfuge. He had felt the same familiar frustration returning now. After they had been reunited, Mortarion's father, his true Gene Father, the Emperor, had bid him to remain within the bounds of this system for more than a barbaran solar year. It had not been easy.
"Imagine,"
said the voice,
"living your whole life in one room of one house and never knowing anything more. Then the door is flung open and you see a street, a town, a nation, a world beyond. But when you are told you cannot venture out. Not yet. Such disappointment.
The Emperor had come to Barbarus with his mighty fleet and offered the people of the poisoned world a chance to rejoin the great Imperium of Man, from which they had been lost millennia ago. They took it without hesitation. Of course they did. They were mortals, after all, and Mortarion's father was a being like no other. How could they have refused him? In the upheaval that followed, much had changed and was still changing. Each day, Mortarion found it a struggle to hold on to the threads of the old life he had lived. Before the coming of the Emperor, Mortarion was the rebel son of the highest of the overlords, at first Nikare's most terrible weapon, then his most hated enemy. He had turned on his adoptive father, and the court of callous beings led by the Twisted Fiend, fighting to liberate the beleaguered lesser humans of Barbarus from the monstrous predations of the creatures who subjugated them. Mortarion was an outsider, then a warrior, and finally a leader. He raised an army that took back the planet one domain at a time, and christened the best of those freedom fighters as his Death Guard. He named them as his unbroken blades. He dwelled on thoughts of those warriors, of Rask and Murnau, Skorval and Kargul and the others, and of course his acerbic brother in battle, his fellow exile, Callus Typhon. That questioning voice he heard in his thoughts always sounded like Callus. Indeed, it was his old friend's way to challenge everything and to ask the unaskable questions. All of them were up here too, out in high orbit beyond the planet, aboard the ships that the Emperor had left behind after his departure. Mortarion's elite were the first to be uplifted and remade by the Imperium's incredible technologies in the biolabs aboard those craft. Even now, that process was nearing its conclusion, as his most trusted soldiers were subjected to a rigorous regime of genetic modification, biological implantation, and neural programming. Mortarion looked away, glancing at one of the gray-armored warriors sharing the shuttle's cargo bay with him, a Dusk Raider, or so they had first been named, one of the tribes of the Emperor's Legiones Astartes, his so-called Space Marines. They were to Mortarion as Mortarion was to his gene father, greater than mortal men, but still born out of mortality. One day soon, Typhon, Rask, and all the others would be like that one. The common clay of the Barbaran Death Guard would emerge reincarnated, striding into the light to stand side by side with the warrior legion the Emperor had brought Mortarion as a gift. They would all carry the name from that day onward. Some would not survive the process, of course. Several had already perished, their bodies unable to withstand the great toll the forced transformation put upon them. And there were more to whom this great boon was denied. Those deemed too old or whose chromosomal matrix was incompatible with the Emperor's bio-altering technology.
A waste of good material,
said the voice in his head. The legionary in gray noticed his Primarch's gaze upon him and came to attention. "My lord?" he asked, taking a step closer. "Do you wish something of me?" He was Terran-born, like all of the Dusk Raiders. By Mortarion's word, they too were now renamed as Death Guard, but they were very different from the Pale Sons of Barbarus. They hailed from dozens of disparate ethnicities drawn from the Northlands of the Emperor's distant throne world, and the warriors of the 14th Legion were seasoned, hardened by battles in the Gene Father's so-called Great Crusade. The warrior was of standard rank, armed with a powerful bolt gun. He was one of several assigned as Mortarion's honor guard, and they were superlative fighters to a man.
"Your name?"
asked the Primarch. "I am Brother Legionary Alexis Zale, my lord." He gave a shallow bow. Mortarion nodded. He remembered this one from recent training engagements on one of the outer worlds of the system.
"Good with that gun," he recalled. "With a dozen like him, Barbarus could have been freed in days, not years."
At first, Mortarion's instinct had been to distrust these Terrans. In the wake of the Emperor's arrival, he had an entire army gifted to him, with the express implication that he would step into the role of their commander and lead them in his Gene Father's wars. But no leader could start from zero. Just as Mortarion had to learn how to use the new weapons and armor the Imperium granted him, so too he learned the tactics and strategy of how to fight with these Legiones Astartes. He was an exceptionally quick study, and months of war games and training had brought Mortarion to where he stood now, battle-ready, straining at the leash to leave Barbarus behind and venture out into the galaxy beyond. But more than that, Mortarion had encountered something he had not expected. He had bonded with these Dusk Raiders in a manner that words could not articulate. In a strange way, it was as if that connection had always been within him, lying dormant, waiting to be activated.
"A question for you, Zale," he said. "Soon we will dock with my father's command ship. What is the protocol?"
Zale's brow furrowed.
"I do not understand. I am still new to this. What will be expected of me?"
Ah, the warrior gave a nod as he caught on. There is much of the Imperium that prides itself on great ceremony. This is an important occasion. I imagine there will be many formalities to be observed. In the depths of his hood, Mortarion's gaunt features twisted into a scowl.
"I have no tolerance for such things."
Zale smiled slightly. "I share your dislike, my lord, but I do not have the rank to ignore those demands."
"I do."
Mortarion rose from the bench and walked towards the portal in the hull. The rest of the voyage passed in companionable silence, and presently a wall of gold and steel rose up ahead of the shuttle as the craft oriented itself towards the yawning maw of a huge docking bay. The enormous hull of the battle barge Bucephalus, flagship of the Emperor, extended away in all directions. The craft was a gargantuan work of martial artistry, ornate and menacing in equal measure, bristling with sculpted weapons and fields of shaped ablative armor. The mass of the Bucephalus was so great that it generated its own gravity gradient, making it necessary for the barge to be moored far away, up above the plane of the ecliptic. Had it come too close to Barbarus, the vessel would have exerted a deadly tidal influence on the planet's already fierce weather systems. His father's ship was mighty, and Mortarion had learned that there were many more craft of such size and scope in the Emperor's war fleet. Some of them belonged to Mortarion's Gene brothers, the sibling Primarchs who had been, as he was, scattered to all points of the etheric compass before they had matured to adulthood. After their first meeting, the Emperor spoke in elliptical terms about the matters of that event, showing genuine emotion and heartache at the trials his sons had endured. But when Mortarion tried to learn more about the causes of this scattering, his father deflected every question.
"If he is so powerful, how could he have let such a thing happen?"
The potential answers to that silent query served only to darken Mortarion's mood further still. The shuttle touched down with a soft rumble, and presently the hatchway at the end of the compartment opened like an iris. Heady, perfumed air entered the ship, and with it came a brash chorus of martial trumpets. The sound pulled Mortarion's lips into a sneer, and he marched out through the hatch, gesturing to Zale and the rest of his honor guard to remain where they were. He emerged into the battle barge's vast docking bay to find ranks of gold-armored custodian guards holding banners and weapons in salute. There were musicians playing an anthem and other figures in over-detailed clothing whose purpose and function were unknown to him. Mortarion imagined that he was supposed to walk between them with measured steps and feigned interest. He did not. Mortarion ignored the gathered throng and advanced alone, striding up a tier of low stairs towards a flood-lit reception dais shrouded by towering drapes of crimson velvet. His father was not there, but the Primarch did not hesitate, the chamber falling to silence around him as the trumpet fanfare faded early. Now, the only sound was the hard thud of his armored boots upon the deck and the hushed whispers of the shocked functionaries. He was almost at the dais level when a man came out to meet him. A human in a tall hat and a brocade coat bearing several tech augmentations, the man was trailed by a device that darted about with no visible means of support. The machine resembled the eye of a steel giant, gouged out and left to bob in the currents of the air, observing everything the man in the coat said and did.
"My Lord Mortarion,"
he began, his tone at once fearful and agitated.
Forgive me, but your stride was, not as metered as expected."
He waved at the curtains.
"The intent was that your father steps forth first, and you—"
The Primarch cut him off.
"Who are you, and what is your purpose here?"
The man stuttered, then made a vague attempt to regain his poise.
"If it pleases the Primarch, I am Lackland Thorn, a noted remembrancer and documentarian to the Imperial Court, and the—"
Again, Mortarion did not let him gain any momentum.
"Remembrancer? What is that?"
All eyes were on the Primarch now, but he paid no heed to them.
"I record."
Thorn gestured at the mechanical orb, which hummed to itself as it moved to watch both of them.
"I write."
He produced an electro quill, and the shimmering ghost hologram of a screen appeared projected from a jewel on one of his gloves.
"It is my honor to document the Emperor's actions for posterity, so that later generations might know his deeds."
Thorn seemed to recover some of his earlier self-confidence and leaned closer.
"I hope to do the same for you, Lord Mortarion."
He smiled insincerely.
"I wish to learn more about the ways of your adoptive people and the nature of your most challenging planet. Barbarus, you call it, yes?" "Barbarus is many things,"
Mortarion replied, looking Thorn up and down. Thorn's patronizing tone irritated him, and judging from the man's physique, the Primarch estimated that this remembrancer would not survive a day down on the surface of his home world.
"You could call it challenging."
He pushed past Thorn and took the last 2 steps up to the top of the dais, hearing a mutter of disapproval move through the assembled crowd. Another protocol he had transgressed, no doubt, but Mortarion did not wait to learn what it was.
"Where is my father?"
he demanded, stepping into an oval of brilliant light cast from illuminator far overhead.
"Are you so eager to see me once again? I am pleased,"
said a voice, and from the corner of his vision, the Primarch saw the velvet curtains parting. A towering figure in golden robes stepped forward and seemed to radiate a brighter glow than the lights above. Somewhere behind him, Mortarion heard Lackland Thorn choke off a gasp and drop to the deck in reverence. Armor clattered against steel as the ranks of soldiery did the same. Only the custodians remained standing, forever ready, their devotion needing no such act to affirm. Mortarion wanted to defy the same compulsion to obeisance, but he could not. He looked briefly at his father and went down on one knee, before bowing his head. The actions happened as if preordained, as if already written into history.
"Rise, my son,"
said the Emperor, and there was a cautious smile on his weathered, tanned face. His patrician gaze took in the wholeness of Mortarion with a single glance, and the Primarch wondered what his Genefather was seeing. How deep could the Emperor's vision penetrate? Did his sight beyond sight see the colors of Mortarion's true psyche? Did he know his son's inner thoughts?
"No,"
said the voice in his head.
"If he did, things would be different, wouldn't they?"
Mortarion came back to his feet and saw the Emperor's smile widen.
"You defy expectation at every turn."
He nodded towards the crowd.
"Forgive me, this sort of thing does not interest you. I should have considered that."
Concern shaded his eyes.
"You've lived through so much hardship. Such pomp and ceremony must seem needless and wasteful."
"I'm sure it has value to some."
Mortarion glanced at Thorn.
"Indeed."
The Emperor's smile returned, and he placed a hand on his son's shoulder, drawing him away.
"Walk with me."
His father dismissed his retinue, all but for a single custodian guard who followed them at a distance of 20 paces, and he strolled from the landing bay with Mortarion at his side. They crossed through an airlock hatch and emerged into a long tubular corridor. The passageway was spun out of a kind of crystalline glass, long curved sheets of vitreous material suspended on frames made of white metal. Mortarion saw that the corridor ran the length of the great ship's spine, ranging from the dock at the bow of the Bucephalus all the way to the gigantic command castle rising up from the stern. Out through the curved windows, Mortarion saw other ships in the fleet that had borne the Emperor back to Barbarus after his year-long absence. Many of them were golden in hue, decorated with lightning bolts and double-headed eagles, craft as big as leviathans floating in the silent dark. Others had differing liveries, and they bore sigils that Mortarion did not recognize. One of them, showing the device of an open book bearing a flame, hove close as a chain of transport lighters moved from it to the Emperor's flagship.
"That belongs to one of your siblings,"
said his Gene-Father, seeing the question before Mortarion could ask it.
"In time, I will find him as I found you, and he will rejoin us. My scouts have brought me encouraging data, and even now they search the galaxy for his probable location."
How many of us are there?
Mortarion did not look away from the other ship.
"For now, too few for what is needed,"
said the Emperor in a moment of introspection.
"But that will change. It may take years, but in the end, I will gather you all back to me. Our work, our destiny, is too important to be denied."
Mortarion wondered what that meant, but he held back from following the thread and kept on his current tack.
When do I meet them?
Before he could stop himself, something more tumbled out.
I have never known a blood brother.
"Very soon,"
promised the Emperor.
"Horus is particularly eager to greet you."
Lupercal.
Mortarion knew the names of some of his siblings, and the Lord of the Luna Wolves was foremost among them.
The first to be found.
"He was," nodded his father. "Just over half a century ago now, by the Terran calendar. He's led the way ever since."
The Emperor's searching gaze found another of the ships in the fleet.
"Horus wanted to join me to welcome you, but I bid him to hold back a while. There's much for you and I to discuss first, Mortarion."
The Primarch saw the pause and called it out.
You hesitate over my name.
"Child of Death."
His father spoke the meaning of it, as translated from the old Barbaran dialects.
"It is not what I might have wished for you,"
admitted the Emperor.
"I hope you never know the pain of having something so important as a child torn from you, that you could not even name it before it was gone."
The words were meant to show a father's bond with his son, but the sentiment rebounded off Mortarion and he was unable to process it. This was an alien experience to him, freighted with conflicting emotions. All at once, it brought back the memory of that fateful day on Barbarus, when the Emperor's lander had touched down outside the free city of Safehold. Mortarion and his Death Guard were returning from a failed mission to kill the High Overlord Nakare, up in the toxic reaches of the highest mountain range. They found the people buzzing with tales of a magnificent visitor they called the Newcomer.
"I have come to Barbarus in search of noble souls," the Emperor had said. "Glory and prosperity await. It will be the dawning of a new age."
In a way, that had been true. But the new age the Emperor brought to Barbarus began by unseating Mortarion from the position of leadership he had earned through struggle and blood. The Primarch fumed inwardly as he thought of that day, of how he had allowed himself to be goaded into a foolish, reckless bargain. He told the Emperor to leave. He told him they did not need the Imperium of Man and the light of illumination. In turn, in challenge, his Gene-Father had offered a wager of a sort.
"Defeat the arch-enemy Nakare in single combat, prove you are a worthy leader, and Barbarus will never know the Imperium's hand."
It was a trap.
Mortarion took up the gauntlet, defying reason to forge his way back up into the most poisoned ranges of the mountains, and there he had called out Nakare, vowing to make good on the oath he had sworn, to end him and free Barbarus once and for all.
But you failed,
said the voice in his head.
as your father must have known you would.
Mortarion had almost died up there, amid toxins so virulent that even the uncanny constitution of a gene-enhanced warlord could not withstand them. On the brink of death, as Nikare stood by and watched his adopted son choke out his last breath, Mortarion knew the end was at hand. But suddenly, the Emperor of Mankind was there, his great golden sword flashing like starshine. Nikare fell to a single blow, and thus Barbarus was finally liberated.
That victory should have been yours.
You recall the day I came to you.
The Emperor plucked the words from the air, as if he were reading Mortarion's mind.
The dispatch of that creature. That was the first of many gifts I gave to you, my son. You understand that, yes?
Yeah. No, whispered the voice. He stole your hard-fought, deserved triumph. And why? So you would be forever beholden to him?
Mortarion shook off the dark thoughts with a wordless mutter, as if dismissing a nagging insect. If the Emperor noticed, he did not mention it. Mortarion's father had paused to study the distant, smoky sphere of Barbarus.
Your world has changed in the past year. It has grown larger in ways you and your adoptive people are only now coming to grasp.
The Pale sons and daughters are adaptable, resilient,
Mortarion replied.
Without those traits, humans would never have survived there.
Admirable. My adjutants inform me that the locutors dispatched from the Imperium have made great progress in illuminating the Barbaran tribes. It pleases me greatly that the assimilation has moved so swiftly.
The Emperor's dark eyes took in Mortarion once more.
And I have seen the reports of your training exercises with your legion. Very impressive.
They fight well,
Mortarion said grudgingly. In truth, the legionaries were the most remarkable warriors he had ever encountered, and part of him ached to take them into real battle, to let them off the chain to fight hard and pure. And soon, his chosen kindred would be ready, ascended to a transhuman status that would make them as war gods to the common men they once were.
With them by your side, the new Death Guard will truly be a force to be reckoned with.
A question arises, however, said his father, nodding towards the planet. I left you a contingent of my most accomplished scienticians and geoformers. Their expertise, their technologies could radically alter the atmosphere and ecology of Barbarus, erase the lethal toxins in the air and the soil, but you refused to use them. You sent them away. Why?
It would be wrong.
Mortarion shook his head.
The children of Barbarus are not attuned to a soft life. To purify the sky and the earth, that would make my people weak. And with the overlords all dead and gone, they still need something to fight.
A slow smile crossed the face of his gene father.
Worry not on that account, Mortarion. The Imperium of Man has battles enough for the people of 10,000 worlds.
Despite himself, Mortarion felt a thin smile of anticipation pull at his lips.
I have more gifts for you,
the Emperor went on, and he pointed to another huge vessel in close formation. It was a great dagger of a ship, a deadly sculpture of crenellations with a sloped prow and a hull shaded in emerald hues. It seemed to pivot at the Emperor's silent command, and upon the ship's cliff-like bow, Mortarion saw a massive rendering of the skull and sun in gunmetal gray.
A war barge of your own, said his father. The Endurance, first of your fleet.
Mortarion felt as if he could reach out with one iron-gloved hand and touch the craft. He wanted it very badly, the power it represented humming in his blood.
But before you take command there, I have something else for you.
The Emperor nodded to himself.
A last formality to mark our bonds of fealty.
What do you mean?
Doubt immediately flooded Mortarion's thoughts. All this generosity made him suspicious.
I will show you.
They left the corridor where it bisected an armored dome emerging from the hull of the Bucephalus, and Mortarion matched the Emperor's pace as the two of them followed a wide spiraling ramp down into another chamber.
My mind is never at rest,
said his father, and for a moment he seemed melancholy. Then the instant passed, and he gestured around.
The work of governing an empire does not occupy my thoughts at all times. One must have a craft that one attends to purely for the joy of it.
That concept was so far beyond Mortarion's experience as to be unfathomable, so he said nothing. Instead, he took in the space, peering into its hazy depths. It was a workshop of sorts, and it reminded him of the tech nomad yards run by the gunmaker tribes and the forge tyrants of Barbarus. It was built on what Mortarion had come to think of as imperial scale, ornate and over-engineered, concerned as much as with needless aesthetics as it was with the function of the place. Spidery automata and half-human helots kneeled before their master as he passed, before continuing in their labors. Some worked at complex devices of unknown function, others busy with items that Mortarion could see were plates of armor or huge melee weapons. Deeper into the chamber, he saw glass capsules within which churned globules of writhing energy, liquid orbs and objects that possessed no human geometry.
My studies help focus my thoughts, said the Emperor. They give me clarity.
He gestured to racks of prototype firearms and modified marks of Space Marine battleplate.
And there is method to it. When each Primarch stands ready, I grant my son a token forged by my own hand. Sometimes a weapon, sometimes a suit of armor, or another object of power.
He spread his hands, taking in the whole of the place.
Your turn has come.
Mortarion wanted to remain disengaged, distant from all this, but the treasures he saw all around stimulated the thirst for knowledge that had always driven him. He wanted to know more. He saw holograms of weapons already granted to his brother Primarchs hanging in the air, displayed like battle trophies. A great spike-headed mace in black and silver, sporting a baleful eye, floating beside a power sword with a winged crossguard that glistened with a waxy cold light. There were other items half-made, still in the middle of their crafting. Mortarion's eye caught on a suit of sable-dark battle armor at one workstation, and the shell of a snarling, animalistic helmet on another. The more he looked, the more weapons Mortarion saw, a profusion of them, hundreds of designs and constructions, hundreds of dismantled relics and shards of millennia-old lost tech. The Emperor's martial diversions were laid out in row after row.
Your father sees himself as weaponsmith as much as warlord.
The insight solidified in Mortarion's mind, and the dark gravity of it drew in resentment.
Is that what you are?
The voice of Mortarion's doubts and distrust, so briefly silenced, now returned to him.
The Primarchs are his weapons.
The Overlord Nikare had considered Mortarion exactly that as he governed the life of his foundling child. Was the Emperor of Mankind so different?
My son?
The resentment grinding in his teeth, Mortarion turned towards the sound of his Genefather's voice and found him offering up a menacing scimitar of broad dimensions and shimmering lethality.
This is for you, he began.
Mortarion spoke before the Emperor could say any more.
I already have a blade.
He shrugged off the giant scythe from where it lay maglocked to his power armor.
I do not need another.
He walked away, deliberately ignoring the stiffening in his father's expression. The war scythe was firm and ready in his grip, as much a part of him now as it had been when he first forged it. Over the years, the blade had been remade, reinforced, made better. It was an extension of who Mortarion was, and nothing else. No starborn metal, no arcane blade right could replace it.
You refuse my token?
The Emperor's words were mild, but there was a warning buried among them. In a day of protocols broken, would this be one too many? Mortarion considered that as his gaze ranged around the room, and settled on a weapon sitting in a plasteel cradle. A pistol, a heavy, drum-shaped firearm made for the hands of something bigger than a man. It was cast out of copper, brass, and steel, and the form of it reminded Mortarion of a craftsman's tool. This was not the overwrought rendering of some weapon artist. It was a killer's device, industrial and heavyweight. Without asking permission, Mortarion went to the gun and gathered it up.
I do need a pistol,
he allowed. He looked closely at the frame. Parts of the mechanism were disconnected, and he automatically set to the task of putting it into working order. The Emperor frowned.
The maker of that weapon called it the Lantern. He told me that before I put him to death.
What did he do to deserve such a fate?
The man led a cult of killers on a manufactory world called Shenlong. They said they worshipped a dragon. His father's gaze grew cold. It became necessary to destroy them in order to ensure compliance of that planet.
Mortarion found the control mechanism for the gun and activated it. The lantern came to life in his grip, instantly biolocking itself to his genetic imprint. It sat well in his long-fingered hand, and he sensed the raw, deadly power humming within the casing.
"This will do,"
he intoned.
"It fits you well," allowed the Emperor.
Slowly, he put aside the scimitar.
"Take it, then. Use the lantern to cast the light of our Imperium into the darkness. One token serves as well as another." He gave a nod. "Once again, my son, you find your own path."
"You mean I defy the plans others have for me?"
Mortarion said the words without looking up from the gun in his fist. The room seemed to grow colder in the wake of his reply, and all the unspoken things between the two of them clouded the air like ghost smoke.
"I am here," said his Gene Father. "Is there something you wish to say to me, Mortarion? Speak your mind, if you will."
There were cords on the belt around Mortarion's waist, and he used them to fashion a lanyard from which the lantern could hang.
"I have many questions,"
he said at length. His voice rasped in the sudden quiet of the domed chamber.
"But I will dismiss them all to know the answer to just one. Tell me why you took my victory from me on the day you came to my world."
A rare flash of confusion flickered in the Emperor's eyes.
"I did it to save my son's life. You would have died up there on that mountain. The fiend who tormented you for so long, the only victory would have been his."
He studied Mortarion for a long moment.
"I could not let you perish, not after spending so long in search of you."
"And yet it was your challenge that sent me there."
"Was it? We may still have much to learn about one another, my son, but one thing is clear to me."
The Emperor pointed at the lantern.
"Is there anything in your life you have done that has not been an act of rebellion, of defiance? You faced Nakare by your choice. That door was already open."
"You did not prevent me from stepping through." "He knew what you would do," said the inner voice. "He made you, after all. Who better to know how to play you?"
A chilly, unknowable distance settled in the Emperor's manner.
"A father is beholden to educate his sons. You learned a valuable lesson that day. I saw I had to remind you of your humility, Mortarion. There are some enemies you alone cannot defeat."
"Never!"
The silent voice bellowed the denial.
"Never admit defeat!"
Mortarion looked down at the weapon in his hand and considered the potential of it. For one giddy second, a dark and terrible question came to the forefront of his mind.
"What if I turn this on him? What would happen then?"
In the next second, the unutterable, unconscionable question melted away, and in its place, there was emptiness. In the yawning abyss of his emotions, Mortarion saw a dim candle of need, an unformed want calling out for connection, for kinship. He crushed the sentiment without hesitation. He had brotherhood and fraternity among those he had shed blood with, and perhaps he might find it in the hearts of his Primarch brethren in the days to come. Given his Gene Father's ways, Mortarion did not doubt that others of his siblings might share a measure of the ambivalence he felt towards their shared progenitor.
"The Emperor allowed you to be taken when you were just a child. Then he found you again, only to diminish you, and for what? To mirror what Nakare had done? At least the Overlord had been honest about his cruelty."
"Will you look beyond this, Mortarion?"
The Emperor offered his hand.
"Will you fight by my side in the Great Crusade, my son?"
"I will."
He took the offer, and the pact was made.
"I have no choice,"
he added.
"Walk with me,"
said his Gene Father once more, leading him out of the chamber and into vast spaces beyond. They were in a vaulted hall now, a space so large it had its own microclimate. In the distance, at the far end of the great gallery, Mortarion saw legionaries in greenish-gray battleplate, and amid them, one as tall as he. A noble figure in robes and furs, imposing and vibrant even at a remove. Your brother was close at hand, a few light years away in the Zhao system, said the Emperor. When he learned I was coming here, he refused to let me travel alone. He beckoned the other Primarch to them, and the other warrior advanced, grinning, a look of joy alight in his eyes.
Lupercal.
Mortarion said his name. Once more that strange ethereal sense of connection came to him, more powerful than ever before, a light shining into his soul.
My brother, said Horus,
his voice thick with emotion.
Welcome home.
That was Lantern's Light, written by James Swallow. Unofficial audio narration by Joe Silva. All Warhammer rights and materials belonging to Games Workshop. This is a fan-made, unaffiliated project.